Merian C. Cooper was the genuine Indiana Jones.
We'll never see his like again. His whole life was an adventure.
Enthusiastic. He was like a little boy with his enthusiasms, just all wound up with excitement.
He was born at a time when there was still strange and exotic and unexplored places in the world, and if you were intrepid enough, you could go out and find them.
Merian C. Cooper was involved in so many different things during his career that you don't zero in on him.
Merian C. Cooper was the director and producer of King Kong, but he was certainly much more than that as well.
He was always interested in something new. Merian C. Cooper really got behind the Technicolor process and really jump-started it in the movie industry. And of course, widescreen and Cinerama. Cinerama was really the start of widescreen and motion pictures.
He was involved in commercial aviation, in the military during World War I and II.
He was a legend in himself and a hero. He took the chances. He did distant, dangerous, and difficult. He went places that people had never been before. He brought things to the screen that they not only had never seen, they never even dreamed of seeing.
Merian C. Cooper was unbelievable, if it weren't all true.
I was a little timid boy. Put that on your tape if you want. But made myself be a champion boxer and wrestler and fought 3 successful wars. I'm King Kong.
Born in 1893, Merian C. Cooper was 10 years old when the Wright brothers made their first flight. He became a passionate exponent of aviation, yet he was equally passionate about primitive tribes and the wilderness, anything that was distant, difficult, and dangerous.
Merian C. Cooper was a little bit on the short and stocky side, and he wanted to compensate for this. So he worked out a lot, he would swim rivers, he would do all kinds of things that other kids couldn't do because he really knew he wanted this life of adventure and exploration.
Cooper being a timid child and then turning out to be the most robust of explorers certainly fits within the American character, at least the American character that's championed at this time, at the turn of the century in the United States. Theodore Roosevelt, who became president during this time, prided himself on the fact that he was an asthmatic as a young man. But through hard work, exercise, and what he called the strenuous life, he overcame those difficulties.
It is quite true that I have a 4th-rate intelligence, not a 3rd-rate one, compared to my father and brother, about a 10th-rate one. It is true that probably all my life I've been trying to compensate for their intellectual accomplishments. I was always had more physical courage than either of them, so I ain't kind to compensate for that.
In 1911, he entered the Naval Academy at Annapolis, but his wild lifestyle did not appeal to the authorities.
But my worst sin was that I was the great proponent that airplanes were going to destroy battleships. The superintendent said this is against the policy of the Navy, you know.
Cooper was forced to resign.
This was traumatic for him, too, because he loved and admired and respected his father and his older brother to such a degree that he knew he let them down. Over and over again in the years that follow, you find him writing to his father saying, I'm doing this, the only reason I'm doing this is so that you can be proud of me. I'm going to accomplish something so that you can be proud of me. If I can't accomplish something and do it in in an honorable way, I won't come back at all.
As American troops poured into France in World War I, Cooper's dream of taking the war into the air came true.
Cooper became a bomber pilot, which was interesting because all the boys in those days wanted to be fighter pilots, because that was where the glamour was and all the action. But Cooper said, no, I can do more damage to the enemy in a bomber than I can in a fighter.
This was more adventure for Cooper than he could ever imagine.
This was really his element. This was what he came for. This is what he was getting satisfaction from. And this is what he was able to mention in the letters back home.
But a communication which horrified his family informed them that he had been killed in battle. The truth was almost as dramatic.
They were flying over the enemy lines. They had dropped their bombs. The enemy planes were strafing them.
The plane was riddled with bullet holes, dozens of bullet holes. They were firing, they were outnumbered by these German planes that were circling them. It was this huge dogfight.
Ed Leonard, in the seat behind Cooper, got shot.
And Cooper thinks he's dead because he's just been shot through the neck and he's slumped back in his chair bleeding.
The gas in the engine caught fire. The fire from the engine is blowing into Cooper's face, into his body. And as he put it later, it was like his whole world was on fire. He was in such pain that all he could think of was to get away from the pain. They weren't using parachutes in those days.
He climbs up on the edge. He's gonna jump. He looks in the back at Leonard and notices Leonard's eyes flickering open.
So he said, I got back in. But his hands were so burned that he tried to hold on to the controls and they'd slip right out of his hands. So in order to control the plane, he used his elbows and his knees. Well, first he wanted to get rid of the flames. So what he thought he would do is dive and open up the throttle so that possibly the gas would all burn up and the flames would go out. He said it was a miracle, but it worked. The flames went out. Now, he was still in great pain from the burns, but he managed to land, and again, using the elbows and using the knees. For years after that, they exchanged telegrams or cards on the anniversary of that date of their being shot down. And Leonard would refer to it as our second birthday, as if they were both dead at that point. Then they miraculously were reborn.
The Germans took the men prisoner, but with good medical attention they recovered rapidly, although Cooper's hands remained scarred for life. In hospital, he met Russian officers who told him of the horrors of Bolshevism. He became a fervent anti-communist. The last few weeks of the war, Cooper remained in prison camp.
Cooper was restless still. He didn't feel as if the war had ended for him, even though the war had ended. What he needed to accomplish for his own sake, he had not fully accomplished. He seemed not to want to go home, and he wanted to do more.
While the Allies argued over the peace treaty, thousands starved. Cooper admired the work of Herbert Hoover, head of the American Relief Administration, and asked to be sent to Poland to feed the people. He helped Polish citizens get food under fire during the siege of Lvov.
This had a tremendous impact on him, and his admiration was boundless. He felt that these were people who deserved tremendous respect. And so he was morally and emotionally and psychologically on their side.
The Red Army invaded Poland in 1920. Cooper helped to form the Kosciuszko Squadron, a group of American aviators who shared his passion for Polish freedom.
Cooper and his comrades gave two reasons why they wanted to fight. One was to help the Polish cause against the Bolsheviks, and two was their love of adventure.
Cooper flew in more than 70 combat missions, dropping bombs and machine gunning troops.
I was attacking the column of cavalry. My plane was just riddled, both my gas tank and my grease tank, and there was nothing to land on, just these ditches, and it was very rough terrain. And my wheels caught in one of these hidden ditches.
He was captured by the Red Cavalry, who were ruthless with prisoners, but was spared because his scarred hands made them think he was a peasant.
I was sent to a very rough Whig prison where we were breaking ice along the railroad. Every prison, there were about 80 of us in this thing. 2 or 3 would die every night. We'd have to throw them out. We had no tools to bury them, so we stacked them up like cordwood outside.
Cooper's life was saved by food smuggled in by his friend Marguerite Harrison, and his spirit was sustained by a book, The Four Feathers, which he later made into a film. It was the story of a man who redeems his honor through incredible courage. The escape from the African jail mirrored his own from Russia in 1921.
They're traveling at night, they're traveling off the roads, they're going through all this like really rough terrain. And one time they turn a corner and this one Russian soldier appears, and his 2 pals grab this soldier and flung him to the ground. Cooper pulls out the knife and slits his throat.
This was apparently a serious traumatic moment for Cooper because it was the first time hand-to-hand combat, you know, somebody that you have to look in the face inches away and kill. It's one thing to shoot people from an airplane from a considerable distance. It's another thing to look somebody in the eye and cut his throat.
Cooper and his comrades successfully reached the border, and he was offered money and land by a grateful Polish government. Not wanting to profit from the war, he declined and set sail for the United States.
Cooper liked to tell the story that when he got back to New York, with just the overcoat on his back, basically, and $1 in his pocket, he was determined to start again, start from scratch. So after he got off the boat, he gave the overcoat to the first beggar he saw, and he gave the $1 to the second beggar he saw. And now he was ready to go.
Cooper decided to indulge a love of adventure that went back to early childhood.
His great uncle, who was also named Merian C. Cooper, gave him a book when he was 6 years old, Adventures in Equatorial Africa. This book was written in 1861. Cooper was reading it as a 6-year-old child and was just amazed at some of the adventures that this explorer was writing about. There were scenes of wild animals attacking villages. There were descriptions of apes carrying off native women into the jungle at night. There was all these incredible adventures, and I think it had a major impact on Cooper's life in the future. It made him want to be an explorer and an adventurer.
Cooper started a new career as explorer and documentary filmmaker. He would immortalize himself as the swashbuckling Carl Denham in King Kong.
He was such a character, and he was really the part that Robert Armstrong played. So if you want to know what he was like, watch King Kong and watch that. He was a showman that had an idea, and by golly, he was going to push it through. He was going to get it done.
I'd have got a swell picture of a charging rhino, but the cameraman got scared. That darn fool, I was right there with a rifle.
The First Mate, played by Bruce Cabot, was based on his partner, Ernest B. Schoedsack.
Think he's crazy, Skipper? Just enthusiastic.
Schoedsack had been my partner from my very first picture when he taught me the basics of picture making. He's a goddamn brilliant man.
Cooper and Schoedsack first worked together on this expedition in Abyssinia. Haile Selassie assembled his army of 50,000 at Cooper's request.
Merian C. Cooper and Ernest Schoedsack lived adventure. Not like filmmakers today who watch a lot of movies or they go to a film school to learn their craft. These guys really lived it, and their stories show it.
Fired with enthusiasm, they set out across the Taurus Mountains in search of a story. They found that story in the struggle of a forgotten tribe seeking to feed their animals.
Marguerite Harrison, who had saved my life in Russia, we took along with us. She put up half the money, and she wanted to go. We didn't know what hardships we were putting her through.
A woman didn't belong in this thing.
Not a bit.
She did everything she did not to make any trouble. Well, but being a woman, you can't help it. She's got to have her private tent and her stuff, and half the money, the little money we had to be spent on taking her along. She didn't contribute a damn thing. And for my part, we're out in front working. This poor fellow didn't neglect his tribe and everything else. To see this goddamn woman wasn't bothered.
I guess you don't think much of women on ships, do you?
No, they're a nuisance.
Well, I'll try not to be.
You've been on the way already.
Cooper fell in love with his Persian tribe and determined to capture their incredible courage.
But what really seems to have interested him was the drama of that way of life, the dramatic overtones, the dramatic quality of that world. And so he was, it seems, ultimately more a dramatist than an ethnographer.
The men went first, and after taking off their cotton shoes to save them, went barefoot into the snow to dig a zigzag trench up the steep mountainside. The women and children followed, driving the livestock and heavily laden pack animals. Some of the women were barefoot, too, and carried heavy wooden cradles with their babies strapped to their backs, and their bruised feet left blood on the snow.
We got damn near froze to death, nearly starved. And Bonnie and I said we'll probably die up here, but let's make the goddamn picture. And we did.
There's so much had to leave out of that thing. Didn't have the film. I wanted to go out and do close-ups of bloody feet in the snow. I just couldn't have the time or the film. Concentrate on those angle shots, and that's all.
It would kill the average man's civilization. Running up to get ahead of those tribes in that crisscross, this was at 12 or 14,000 feet.
Yeah, it was fun.
But
it was fun.
Schoedsack and I never completed Grass. Has some great stuff in it, great migration, but this ain't what we wanted to tell. We wanted to tell the story of a family inside of a migration, put some human drama into it, natural drama. It would have been the goddamnedest film in the world.
Grass was not intended for theaters, but for the lecture circuit. Fortunately, it was seen by producer Jesse Lasky and released through Paramount. Lasky wanted another natural drama, and Cooper and Schoedsack set off in search of it. In the jungles of Siam, they found what they felt lacking in Grass, a story revolving around the struggle of an individual family. They lived in the jungle an entire year, developing a close relationship with the local people and the animals.
We have to realize that the way Cooper and Schoedsack pursued wild animals in Chang was something that had never been done before, with tigers coming up within inches of the lens. They were the pioneers. Chang was the film that showed filmmakers how to do this.
Cooper, always wanting to push the envelope, at the end of Chang, wanted to do something different with the elephant stampede. It was this huge stampede of elephants that was coming through a village and tearing down the huts and the people running and babies crying and everything. They ended up doing this process called magnoscope. The picture would get bigger at a certain point, at the climax of a movie. And we talk about showmanship.
The effect was astonishing. With the screen opening up and the elephants charging, and it looked like they were coming right out at you. Behind the screen, they've got men doing thunder drums, big kettle drums, with the elephant stampede. And of course, the effect on the audience, people are electrified.
It wasn't something that took off, but the seed was planted in Cooper's imagination, I'm sure, because from then on, technical innovation was one of the strong fascinations for him in the film industry.
Cooper and Schoedsack's next project was The Four Feathers, a conventional fiction film combining location and studio work. But producer interference left Cooper disillusioned with Hollywood. With transcontinental air travel in its infancy, Cooper became a director of Pan American Airways. Airline passengers still had to travel part of the route by train, but by the end of the 20s, they could cross the United States from coast to coast in 48 hours.
I liked aviation. I was fond of it, but I didn't like business. And if it had been just running the line, which I wasn't doing, I probably would have stayed with it. My life has been split about equally between aviation and pictures.
Now he was based in New York City. He watched in amazement as the skyline appeared to change almost daily. A few blocks from his office rose the tallest structure in the world, the Empire State Building. The final element of an idea he had been carrying in his head for years fell into place. He called upon the leading lady of his last picture, Fay Wray.
He had started by saying to me, "You're going to have the tallest, darkest leading man in Hollywood." And because I knew he liked me very well, that he might have been hearing that I was hoping that Cary Grant would come to California. Now, I thought this was wonderful. However, it wasn't what Cooper had in mind at all.
My first encounter with King Kong was at Grandma's Chinese, and I haven't been the same since.
To be 11 years old and be exposed to a picture like King Kong was a world-shattering event.
They took you by the hand from the mundane world of the Depression and brought you into the most outrageous fantasy that's ever been put on the screen.
It was just about the greatest film ever made. But the film terrified me. It was so fantastic. It was so real, but in the best way, in the adventurous, romantic way, that when it came out, you relived the sequences in your head.
Kong actually was an incredible influence on me because I became a gorilla. Now, not too many people can say that, I don't believe. I always wanted to be a gorilla somehow. I guess it was just in me, and Kong is the one that pushed me over. I guess said, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And I did it for years and years and years.
Kong would become one of the most enduring movies ever made. But in the beginning, no studio wanted anything to do with Cooper's idea. Cooper became assistant to David O. Selznick at RKO and finally found someone interested in his gorilla picture, which he would produce and direct with his partner, Ernest B. Schoedsack.
He had many, many different experiences as part of his background to draw from. And when he made King Kong, he made a movie based on his past experiences, his experiences of going out into the jungle and to discover something that hadn't been seen before. He wanted, as his fantasy version of those experiences, to create something as impactful as his original documentary work, but taken to the extreme with the visual effects department at RKO to bring back an experience that no one had seen before in motion pictures.
This picture took a year to make, and RKO was short of money, very short. Now, David played one vital part. He was the only human being that backed me up 100%. And he never looked at the rushes. He didn't know what the hell I was doing. Everybody thought it was nuts, and everybody wanted me to put a man in a gorilla suit. And it would have been just horrible.
His first idea was to use a real gorilla and import it to the island of Komodo, where his friend Douglas Burden had found primeval dragon lizards and had brought them back to the Bronx Zoo where they had perished, killed, as Cooper said, by civilization. The problem had been solved a different way in The Lost World, in which a dinosaur ran amok in London. The dinosaur was a miniature, brought to life by technical wizard Willis O'Brien, known as Obie, who animated these creatures one frame at a time. O'Brien was now making a film at RKO using the same technique. Cooper was unimpressed by the film and closed it down, but realized the way to bring Kong to life was through Obie and his team.
A number of scenes came from creation into Kong. For example, the log scene. In creation, they had a prehistoric creature knocking the men off the log, crossing a chasm. Well, that was put into King Kong by having Kong come and shake the log, which was much more dynamic.
They didn't have any technology. They invented the technology as they went along. And I think the miniature rear projection screen was devised for that film. Where you saw Fay Ray in the cave, for instance, and Kong is moving in the same place. There was a miniature reprojection screen that projected her one frame at a time along with the movement of Kong. And the mats, the different mat things that they did, the mat camera, and the equipment they used, a lot of that stuff had never even been done before. Some of the glass paintings, the multi-screen paintings and stuff were just amazing, and you could see it all. You could see everything, and you could see every dime was in that film.
The special effects took such a long time, Cooper saved money by making another film, using the same sets and some of the same cast. Kong's special effects may have been time-consuming, but they set a new standard.
Now this is the only remaining King Kong model. Now what they did is Marcel built up sponge rubber, and he would build it up and do the muscle structure and tie it off with thread and string to form the muscles. Then he would cover it with rabbit fur. Now you'll notice the fingers on Kong. Each joint was made individually in a metal shop. I mean, it's amazing. You can't go down to a hardware store and give me some Kong fingers. They don't make them. This is basically like a human skeleton. Each little piece is tied together, and each little piece can move independently of each other, which is an amazing feat by itself. Then, Obi would have to come in to animate it. Now, it's got all the rubber and stuff on it, which makes it a little harder to do. And say he's going to animate these fingers. So he would do one finger, another finger, very, very slight moves. Get out, click, come back again, slightly, another finger, click. He would keep this up as long as it took to finally end up. It took months and months to do this. And then there were multiple moves. You had to move not only the head and the mouth, maybe, the arm, this, maybe the body. And Obi had to remember in his mind how to move every single piece of this.
There's nothing to compare to the incredible choreography of Kong fighting the T-Rex. That still has to be one of the best on-screen fights of any kind.
And Obi, when he couldn't do something, he would get drunk and disappear for 3 or 4 days. Oh, boy. So I finally got down there and acted out every goddamn gesture that Kong made, and the animators followed my movements.
What Kong shows us is so much well-observed both human and animal behavior. Kong toying with the torn jaws of the slain T-Rex after he's killed him in battle. It seems like such a both believably animalistic behavior, and almost shows sort of a childlike curiosity or playfulness from Kong. And it's moments like that that people still study to this day.
Well, Willis O'Brien was the animator who would imbue Kong with life. He would create a performance through this puppet. And the fact that we can be amazed by this puppet is really due to O'Brien's ability to do stop motion and create a character that we can relate to and understand. That's an amazing ability to be able to do that.
The definition of animation means to give a soul to something, and I think the original Kong represents all that is great about true animation craft.
They had so much trouble filming it. It was one of the most difficult exercises ever attempted, I think, up to that time in cinema history. So Cooper finally turns to Schoedsack one day towards the end, and he said, "You know, we ought to kill the son of a bitch ourselves." And so on that famous last shot you see of the Navy planes boring in on top of the Empire State Building, it's Cooper at the controls and Schoedsack on the gun.
Kong was a tremendous success, and Cooper became head of production at RKO.
It stands to reason that what Merian C. Cooper, aviator Merian C. Cooper, became film executive at RKO, he would find any reason he could to involve aviation in motion picture stories. And talk about inventiveness, taking the American musical and taking it up into the air for flying down to Rio. No one had ever done anything like that with a musical. Busby Berkeley could put his camera on a boom and make the musical more fluid. Cooper did him one better by taking it up into the air.
Cooper credited the idea to his associate Lou Brock, who knew Cooper would find this unusual use of aircraft irresistible. Cooper planned a host of improvements for RKO. Top of the list was to increase their roster of female stars. He had a test made of Katharine Hepburn, then appearing in a Broadway play, and teamed for the first time Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. He had intended to give the part to Dorothy Jordan, who had danced with Astaire on stage, but he married her instead and quit RKO to go on a year-long honeymoon.
I figured that a man only gets married once, and I was much older than my wife, and I was going to have a year off if all hell broke loose. I see. And with the usual Hollywood gossip thing, nobody could believe that man would throw away $1 million to have a honeymoon. I did.
Despite the frenzied pace of his life, he found great contentment with his family, and the couple had 3 children together.
Who's there?
On his return, Cooper was fired with the ambition to make films in color. The old 2-color process had recently been superseded, but no studio wanted to back the new 3-strip Technicolor. So Cooper set up Pioneer Pictures with financier Jock Whitney and David O. Selznick.
Here is the screen as you now know it in its customary shades of black and white. Here it is, flooded with the rich reality of natural color. This specially prepared scene of Miriam Hopkins as Becky Sharp shows her transformed from phantom shadows into the breathless beauty of living color by the greatest achievement in motion pictures since the advent of sound.
Technicolor was a very new process then. Nobody believed that all films would be made in color one day. It was unheard of. Cooper's involvement in Technicolor shows what a brilliant man he was, what a pioneer he was, how forward-thinking he was.
It was largely through Cooper's influence that Gone with the Wind was made in Technicolor.
Now the dance and my reputation will be lost forever.
Enough courage you can do without a reputation.
All you do talk scandalous.
The impact of Technicolor was overwhelming and changed forever the opinion of skeptics that color would not work in a long feature motion picture.
When war came, Cooper was beyond military age. That didn't stop him abandoning his film projects and returning to active service.
Ever the man of honor, Merian C. Cooper, prior to his entry into military service, sold all of his considerable aviation stocks so that it would not be perceived in any way, shape, or form that he was profiting from the war experience.
By the time of Pearl Harbor, China had been bearing the Japanese onslaught for 4 years. The Japanese indiscriminately bombed Chinese cities. American volunteers had formed a squadron under General Chennault, known as the Flying Tigers. After Pearl Harbor, it was reformed as the China Air Task Force. Cooper became Chennault's chief of staff.
Coop made a great contribution to our effort over there in China. Coop was absolute genius. He would revise his plans over and over and over again because he wanted to be sure that the people running that mission didn't have to take some unnecessary risk or try to save as many lives as he could. He'd be the first one to go. He'd be right in that lead bomber.
Cooper planned bombing missions against Japanese positions in China. He flew in a series of daring raids, driving his staff to the limit.
He was a slave driver. He burned out a lot of operation guys. He relentless, night and day. His mind was working all the time. I mean, it didn't just stay in one place, you know. He was a very original thinker. He had no fear of anything. I mean, Coop was
a guy that was absolutely fearless, and he didn't even fear the devil.
During one raid alone, his squadron shot down 29 Japanese planes, destroyed 42 on the ground. The USS Missouri, September 2nd, 1945. Cooper's contribution to the war effort was so great, he was invited aboard for the historic signing of surrender by the Japanese. A few years after the war, Cooper was promoted to brigadier general. He tried to set up a film about Chenault, but never found the money. One of his chief concerns was the threat communism posed to American values. He saw film as an ideal platform. The whole trick, he said, is to do something strong and great and American that will arouse the emotions of the audience. From now on, virtually all of Cooper's films would be collaborations with the great John Ford. The notoriously difficult Ford had a special regard for Cooper.
One of the things that really cued me in on what a great man he was the respect with which John Ford treated him. John Ford wasn't an easy man to impress, and he treated Mr. Cooper with great respect. They were both giants, they really were. And he was a perfect match for John Ford. His personality blended perfectly with John Ford's personality.
The two men had worked together since the 1930s when they formed their own production company. They reformed it after the war, but now they had a slightly different agenda, especially Cooper.
He had this idea that when he came back from the war, he wanted to use film to counter communist propaganda. So he really wanted to make movies that would tell the story of America, that would make people proud of their country.
Merian Cooper linked up with John Ford because he recognized another romantic. Ford never admitted it. He was a crusty son of a bitch on the outside, but that wasn't the real John Ford. His inside were pure marshmallow. And in Merian Cooper's films and the directors he chose to make them, reality never intrudes and spoils it. So you can leave the theater after seeing the cavalry films of The Quiet Man or King Kong, and you go out to welcome life into your heart and soul, and you have Merian Cooper to thank for that.
Go searching way out there.
The Searchers was their final project together. John Wayne brings home the girl captured by Indians.
Find, but where, oh Lord, Lord, where? Right away.
Well, I like everything Jack Ford ever directed. I like She Wore a Yellow Ribbon and The Quiet Man terrifically. I like Ford and Patsy. I liked them all. We didn't do a picture I didn't like, you know. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done them.
Merian Cooper, oh my gosh, he was a character to have. He would always boast about his achievements. He was proud of himself, he was delighted with himself, and everybody else thought he was full of himself, but they still loved him. I mean, when you're that full of yourself, it's delightful. He was always smoking his pipe. He was always discabobbled, his shirt tail out, maybe the socks not matching.
His secretary sometimes would have to remind him that his pants weren't buttoned or the pipe was burning a hole in his pocket or something.
He would be so absent-minded, he'd come down, he was a colonel at that time. His eagle would be upside down, backwards, or he might be walking down the thing smoking his pipe
naked as a jaybird, you know.
He had a childlike quality about him anyway, you know, which a lot of brilliant men are like that, I think. They have a part of them that never grew up that is what the key to their creativity, I think.
All right, Joe.
An unlikely production from the stable of Cooper and Ford was Mighty Joe Young. It was directed not by Ford, but by Ernest Schoedsack, despite an eye injury suffered during the war.
He's the first director to ever direct a movie blind, but he was just one of the finest men I've ever known in my whole life, and I remained friends with him forever. And I'll never forget when I went with him to the premiere or a preview at the Pantages, and all the kids came up and said, "Were you the Mighty Joe Young?" They all thought that he was the gorilla because he was so tall.
Cooper made a strange request of Tex Hill.
After the war, Coop hired me to do some picture work for him over in Africa. He came up with this picture of Mighty Joe Young that he wanted to do, and that's a story of where a little girl grows up with this baby gorilla, and they become friends. So he sent me over there to catch the baby gorilla to lend reality to it, because as he grew up, he went into the animation that he did in King Kong.
Assisting Willis O'Brien was a newcomer to animation, Ray Harryhausen, another film legend, introduced by Cooper.
On the picture, I tried to get in the mood of a gorilla, and instead of having tea, I would have celery and carrots on my break. I thought that would get me in the mood. It sounds eccentric, but it helped.
A banana, Joe. Want another one? Here.
A lot of the inspiration for the character of Mighty Joe Young came from my constant viewing of King Kong. I remember O'Brien in Kong, when he broke through the gate, Kong brought his fist down, and that kept coming back to me, and I tried to make that as part of his character, that every time he was enraged, he would hit the ground with his fist, and that became a good part of him.
Cooper not only came on the set a lot, but he was always on the set. He was there, it was his money by golly, and he wanted to see where it was spent. And I think he enjoyed seeing every penny spent. Everything for Cooper had to be first class big.
1952, an astonishing event on Broadway.
I remember going to the opening of Cinerama. We didn't know what to expect. We had no idea what we were going to see. They just talked about something brilliant, great was going to happen. They did keep it under wraps. I didn't know what that devil was.
In fact, it is the first public demonstration of an entirely new medium, which we believe is going to revolutionize the technique of motion picture storytelling. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cinerama.
And the screen began to open until it practically ate you. Sound, you were surrounded with sound. And then suddenly, you shot out of a tunnel and you realized that you were on a roller coaster. And as the roller coaster riding went zoom up and then plunge down.
It was absolutely mind-boggling in that theater. Some people thought that the back wall had fallen out of the theater.
The sound of people screaming, grown-up people screaming like kids.
It was the biggest night I've ever seen in the theater of pictures. People stayed on the sidewalk by the hundreds till 4 or 5 in the morning talking about it. And I knew we had revolutionized the picture business.
It engulfs you. That big mouth reaches out and goes gulp and pulls you into the screen, and you never come out.
Of course he'd be behind Cinerama, because it was the biggest, the best, enormous. He always, that's the way he saw life. He always saw it enlarged.
To show Cinerama, theaters had to be equipped with 3 projectors, for the process involved a camera shooting 3 separate rolls of film, and for the first time, stereophonic sound.
Cooper came out, saw the demonstration film, and just pretty much fell in love with this new innovation. And that's what Cooper was all about anyway. He just loved challenges and climbing a new mountain, so to speak.
But this gave Cooper a serious problem. He was already producing The Quiet Man on the West Coast, while Cinerama was based in the East.
Well, he was able to pull it off by working 5 days a week in Los Angeles on The Quiet Man, getting on a plane on a Friday night after the day's work, hopefully sleeping on the plane, arriving in New York early in the morning on Saturday, working all day Saturday night, all Sunday morning, and most of Sunday night, and getting on a plane at midnight to fly back to L.A. But that was Coop. He was tireless.
Like many of you, I have traveled up and down these United States, and in doing so, I have seen the most famous of our sights.
In the end of this thing, everybody tried to get me to do a short dramatic skit. And I said, no, I'm going to cross the United States by airplane. I wanted to go through the clouds and then go up through the clouds, and I knew just the music I wanted. I picked out every note of music that went in the end of that thing.
Washington, where the sweeping panorama in motion is dominated by the Pentagon, that building famous for its size and the ramifications of office and department.
Merian C. Cooper figured that the best man for the job to do this flight over America was the famous aerial Hollywood stunt pilot, Paul Mantz. So he contacted him, and Paul fitted out a B-25, a World War II B-25, with a camera in the nose. So here's the only Cinerama camera in existence, was mounted on the front of this plane to shoot these sequences. If anything ever happened with this, that was the end of Cinerama, basically. As the dailies were coming through, Cooper would look at it and say, oh, no, that's all wrong. This has got to be closer. The Cinerama camera made things look further away because of its extreme wide angle. So to get really dynamic shots and to get right down into the grooves and tunnels of a canyon, for example, you literally had to fly practically where your wingtips were scraping the rocks on the edge to get a dynamic shot.
Oh, man. I don't, it was so graphic, you know, it'd make you want to duck.
Zion National Park in southern Utah, a breathless thriller for our finale. The first time a plane has ever flown down in Zion Canyon, between the winding walls of jagged stone, skimming over ridges and spikes of rock.
And when they got the dailies back and saw it in Cinerama, both Coop and Bob Bendick were just amazed at what they were seeing. They were almost getting airsick. It was so good.
You are about to see the first public exhibition of an entirely new form of entertainment.
Now, the movie opened with a black and white prologue. Ernest B. Schoedsack, Ruth Rose, and Cooper had written a script for a prologue because they wanted a slow build-up. And it was in black and white, and it was introduced by Lowell Thomas as he took us through this journey of film history, so to speak, leading up to what you're about to see, ladies and gentlemen.
Everybody, the whole board of directors tried to persuade me to put the roller coaster at the end of the picture instead of the beginning. I said, you've got to shock them. And one of the directors said, if you open with that roller coaster, at least 6 women will faint and run out of the theater. And I said, if they don't, we've got a failure.
Well, they made their date, September 30th, 1952, but just barely. It was literally an emergency to cut in the last few shots. They were so nervous about this film that they actually had guards guarding it and traveling across town because they couldn't afford anything to go wrong with this at this point. So as the people are arriving, all these people dressed up to come see this interesting new event, the film is arriving in the back door, just barely on time to get it on the screen.
Do you know when I opened that picture that night, that not even me had ever seen the whole picture all together? Never even run it in a projection room. I'd cut it together, it was in my brain.
I sat there and I wept. And my wife turned to me and she said, why are you crying? I said, of all those far places I will never see, huh? We travel to romance ourselves with surrounding, to be lost in architectures. And I said, we're so poor, we're never going to travel. And when are we going to have a chance to do that? the essence of Merian Cooper was that a boy genius who was enthused with life was making these. And he was showing them to you to delight you and to prove once again more how wonderful it was to be alive. They're full of the joy of living, and you keep going back to warm your hands at his films.
You have the biggest screen ever and the biggest expanse of America ever gliding by. You have his love for music as the Mormon Tabernacle Choir sings the glories of America. And I think you have the soul of this very big man in this. And in what other vehicle could the camera be in for Merian C. Cooper but an airplane, winging its way across the country he loved and fought for?
Thank you.